They called her the Widow of Winter. Luna Queen Lorean Silvercrest didn't just reject suitors, she destroyed them. For 7 years, the most powerful alphas in the realm knelt before her throne in the Ivory Hall, offering territories, armies, and their very souls. She refused every single one. No alliance was strong enough. No warrior was worthy enough. The court thought she was untouchable, but they were wrong. She wasn't rejecting them because she was invincible. She was rejecting them because she was afraid. And on a frost-bitten Monday in December, while every eye in the throne room watched the alphas who performed, the queen's gaze fell on the man who didn't even look up. Alpha Thaddeus Ironpaw was built like a war machine, 6'5" of pure muscle wrapped in ceremonial armor that probably cost more than a small village. He knelt before Queen Lorean's throne, his massive head bowed, his voice echoing through the frozen silence of the Ivory Hall. "Your Majesty," he rumbled, "I offer you the Western Peaks, 3,000 warriors, mines of silver and iron that stretch for miles, and my eternal loyalty as your king consort." Lorean didn't move. She sat perfectly still on her throne of white marble and silver, her platinum hair swept back in an intricate crown of braids, her ice-blue eyes utterly devoid of warmth. She wore a gown of winter-white silk that looked like frozen starlight, and around her throat a collar of diamonds that caught the light like shattered ice. She let the silence stretch, let him sweat, let the entire court hold its breath. Then she smiled. It was the smile of a wolf before it strikes. "Stand up," she commanded. Thaddeus obeyed, hope flickering across his brutish face. Lorean rose from her throne with the fluid grace of a predator. She descended the 7 steps of the dais slowly, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. She circled him once, twice, examining him the way one might examine a horse at auction. "You offer me warriors," she said softly, "as if I don't already command the finest army in the realm. You offer me mines, as if my coffers aren't already overflowing. And you offer me loyalty." She stopped directly in front of him, tilting her head. "From a man who betrayed his own brother for a piece of borderland?" Thaddeus's face went white. "Your Majesty, that was—" "Pathetic," Lorean finished. "Guards, remove him." Before the humiliated Alpha could protest, she'd already turned her attention to the next supplicant. Lord Cassius Nightshade, beautiful in that dangerous way, dark-haired and silver-tongued, with eyes like liquid mercury. He didn't kneel. That was his first mistake. "My queen," he purred, flashing a smile that probably melted 1,000 hearts. "I offer you not gold or soldiers. I offer you something far more valuable. I offer you pleasure, partnership, a king who can match your fire, who can—" "Can you match this?" Lorean's hand moved faster than the eye could follow. She had a dagger, where had that come from, pressed against his throat before he could blink. The entire court gasped. Cassius, his carefully constructed confidence shattered. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." "Get out." She released him with a shove. "Before I decide your blood would make a lovely decoration for my floor." Cassius stumbled backward and fled. The court was silent. No one dared breathe. Lorean turned back toward her throne, and that's when her eyes swept over the far corner of the room. That's when she saw him. He was half hidden behind one of the massive marble pillars, wearing clothes that marked him as palace staff. Simple brown trousers, a worn work shirt, dirt under his fingernails. His dark hair fell across his forehead in an untidy mess, and a smudge of soil on his jaw. He held a pair of gardening shears in one hand and looked profoundly uncomfortable, like he desperately wished he could be anywhere else. He wasn't watching the spectacle. He was staring at the floor, waiting for permission to leave. Something about that hit Lorean like a physical blow. Every other person in this room was performing, posturing, calculating, scheming for her attention. This man just wanted to tend his roses and be left alone. She felt it then, a snap,
like a rope pulled too tight finally breaking, a warmth that spread through her chest, foreign and terrifying and impossible. The mate bond. No, that wasn't possible. She'd already been mated. Matthias was her mate, and when he died 7 years ago, that bond died with him. The bond happened only once. Everyone knew that.
But this was unmistakable. The pull, the recognition, the sudden, overwhelming certainty that this man, this stranger, was hers. Lorean's hands began to shake. She hid them in the folds of her gown. "You," she heard herself say, her voice cut through the throne room like a whip crack. "By the pillar, step forward." The groundskeeper's head snapped up. His eyes, gods, his eyes were the color of rich earth, warm and deep, widened in something close to panic. "Your Majesty?" His voice was rough, unused to speaking in such grand spaces. "I said step forward." It wasn't a request. The entire court turned to stare as the groundskeeper walked toward the dais. He moved like someone walking to his own execution, his shoulders hunched, those work-roughened hands clutching the shears like a lifeline. He stopped at the base of the steps and dropped to one knee, his head bowed. Protocol, even from the lowest servant. "What is your name?" Lorean demanded. Her heart was racing. She could feel the mate bond strengthening with every second of proximity, wrapping around her ribs like chains. "Willard Ashford, Your Majesty." He didn't look up. "I'm the groundskeeper. I tend the rose gardens and the memorial plots. I apologize for the intrusion. I was told to wait until the ceremony concluded before—" "Look at me." Willard hesitated. Then, slowly, he raised his head. When their eyes met, the world tilted. Lorean saw it in his face, the exact moment he felt it too, the bond snapping into place on his end. His eyes went wide, his breath catching. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other, two people caught in the undertow of something neither of them wanted, and neither could escape. "Everyone out," Lorean said. Her voice sounded strange even to her own ears. "Now." "Your Majesty," someone began. "Out." The throne room emptied in seconds. Nobles and guards and rejected suitors fled like startled birds, leaving only Lorean and the groundskeeper kneeling at her feet. The massive doors slammed shut. Silence crashed over them. Willard was still staring at her, confusion and something like horror written across his face. "Your Majesty, I don't understand." "You will return here tomorrow at dawn," Lorean said, her voice harsh because if she didn't make it harsh, it would shake. "You will come to my private chambers. You will tell no one. Am I understood?" Yes, Your Majesty, but—" "Go." Willard stood on unsteady legs. He bowed, a jerky, awkward movement, and backed toward the doors. Just before he reached them, he paused. "Your Majesty, do you feel it too?" Lorean turned away, unable to look at him, unable to acknowledge what was happening, because if she acknowledged it, she'd have to face what it meant, and she wasn't ready for that. "Leave, groundskeeper, before I change my mind about letting you live." She heard his footsteps retreat, heard the door open and close. Only then did Lorean allow herself to collapse back onto her throne. Her hands were shaking violently now. Her breath came in short gasps. She pressed a palm to her chest, feeling the mate bond pulse beneath her ribs like a second heartbeat. This was impossible. Mates bonded once, only once. The texts were clear. When a mate died, the bond died with them. She'd mourned that death for 7 years. She'd built her entire identity around being the widow of winter, the queen who needed no one. And now this gardener with dirt under his nails and sadness in his eyes. This man who somehow, impossibly, felt like coming home. Lorean stood and walked to the far wall where a portrait hung, her and Matthias on their coronation day.
She stared at the painted face of her dead mate, the man she'd loved, the man who'd betrayed her. Behind the portrait, carved in the stone in letters only she could see, were the words she'd etched there herself the night he died. Never again. She pressed her forehead against the cold marble, trying to steady her breathing. Outside, thunder rumbled. The storm was coming. And somewhere in the palace, in the servants' quarters, a groundskeeper named Willard Ashford sat on his narrow cot, staring at his shaking hands, wondering why the most terrifying woman in the realm felt like the missing piece of his broken soul. Neither of them slept that night. Both of them knew that when dawn came, everything would change.
Lorean didn't sleep. She paced her chambers like a caged wolf, the mate bond thrumming beneath her skin like a second pulse she couldn't silence. At the time the first gray light of dawn crept through her windows, she'd made her decision. She needed answers. She needed control. She needed to understand what the hell was happening to her. At precisely 6 a.m, she summoned Diana Ravenclaw. Her spy master arrived within minutes, a tall, sharp-eyed woman with silver-streaked black hair and a network of informants that stretched across 3 kingdoms. Diana had been Lorean's most trusted advisor since Matthias's death. If anyone could dig up the truth about Willard Ashford, it was her. "Tell me everything about the groundskeeper," Lorean commanded without preamble. "And I mean everything. Where he came from, who he was, why he's here." Diana's expression didn't change, but Lorean caught the slight raise of an eyebrow. "The groundskeeper, Your Majesty." "Did I stutter?" "No, Your Majesty." Diana pulled a small leather notebook from her coat. "I took the liberty of gathering preliminary information after yesterday's unusual dismissal. Willard Ashford, aged 32, arrived at the palace 5 years ago seeking work, keeps to himself, exemplary work ethic, no disciplinary issues, no known associates." "Dig deeper." Diana hesitated. That alone was alarming. Diana never hesitated. "Your Majesty, his past is complicated. Are you certain you wish to—" "Now, Diana." The spy master nodded slowly. Willard Ashford was the beta of the Ashford Pack. 7 years ago, they controlled a modest territory in the Black Hollow region. The pack numbered around 250 wolves, families, children, elders. It was a peaceful pack, prosperous. Lorean's stomach tightened. She knew where this was going. The Alpha, a man named Garrett Ashford, Willard's older brother, decided to expand their territory. There was a narrow pass through the mountains that would have given them access to valuable trade routes. Willard advised against it. He told his brother it was too risky, that the neighboring pack would see it as an act of war. And? Diana's jaw clenched. Garrett ignored him. He took 200 wolves through that pass. It was an ambush. The entire force was slaughtered. Men, women, and, according to reports, at least 40 children. The air left Lorean's lungs. 40 children. Willard wasn't with them, Diana continued, her voice carefully neutral. He'd stayed behind to guard the main settlement with a skeleton crew. When news of the massacre reached them, the remaining pack members blamed him. They said he should have stopped Garrett, should have refused the order, should have died with them. "That's insane," Lorean heard herself say. "He was the beta. He gave his counsel. His alpha ignored it." "Logic rarely matters in grief, Your Majesty." Diana closed her notebook. "The survivors exiled him, declared him a rogue. He wandered for 2 years before showing up here requesting the most menial position available. He's been tending your gardens ever since." Lorean turned away, staring out at the frost-covered grounds. From her window she could see the memorial gardens, neat rows of white roses marking the graves of fallen soldiers and nobility. And there, in the early morning mist, was a solitary figure moving among them. "Willard." "He tends the graves," Lorean whispered. "Every morning before dawn," Diana confirmed, "without fail, even in winter." Lorean's hands clenched into fists. She understood now. She understood completely. Willard Ashford wasn't just a groundskeeper, he was a man punishing himself for surviving, just like she'd punished herself for 7 years, rejecting every suitor, building walls of ice around her heart because she blamed herself for not seeing Matthias's betrayal coming. 2 survivors, 2 people drowning in guilt they shouldn't carry. "Reassign him," Lorean said abruptly. "I want him working exclusively in my private gardens, no other duties." Diana's eyes sharpened. "Your Majesty." "That will be all." Lorean. Diana rarely used her given name, but when she did, it meant she was about to say something important. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. The council is already restless. If they think you're showing favor to a disgraced rogue, let them think what they want." Lorean's voice could have frozen the sun. "I am still queen. I do as I please." Diana bowed and left, but not before giving Lorean a look that clearly said, "This is a mistake." Maybe it was. Probably it was. Lorean didn't care. That night, she found him exactly where she knew he'd be. The private gardens were Lorean's sanctuary, a walled space behind the palace where night-blooming roses grew in silver profusion. The air was thick with their perfume, sweet and melancholy. Moonlight painted everything in shades of white and shadow. Willard knelt beside a rosebush, carefully pruning dead branches. He worked with a quiet intensity, his movements precise and gentle. He hadn't noticed her yet. Lorean stepped into the garden, closing the gate behind her. The click of the latch seemed impossibly loud. "Do you always work in the dark, groundskeeper?" Willard snapped up. He scrambled to his feet, dirt smudged his cheek, those earth-brown eyes wide with alarm. "Your Majesty, I apologize, I didn't realize you'd be—" "Answer the question." He swallowed hard. "The night-blooming roses open after sunset. They're delicate, they need tending when they're at their strongest." Lorean moved closer. She could smell earth and roses and something uniquely him, wood smoke and winter air. The mate bond tightened, urging her closer, whispering, "Mine, mine, mine." She crushed the instinct ruthlessly. "I know about Black Hollow," Lorean said. Willard go very still. His face shuddered, all emotion bleeding away. "Then you know what I am, what I cost them." "I know what happened, that's not the same thing." "Isn't it?" His laugh was bitter, broken. 200 wolves dead because I wasn't strong enough to stop my brother. 40 children who'll never grow up because I failed to— "Stop!" Lorean's command cut through his self-flagellation like a blade. "You gave your counsel, he rejected it. The blood is on his hands, not yours." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice dropped to something raw, something dangerous. "I understand what it's like to blame yourself for someone else's choices. I understand what it's like to build your entire existence around guilt you don't deserve." Willard stared at her, really looked at her, and for the first time Lorean felt truly seen, not as the widow of winter, not as the untouchable queen, but as a woman carrying wounds that had never healed. "Why do you tend the graves?" Lorean heard herself ask. "Every morning before dawn. Why?" Willard's throat worked. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because someone should remember. Because they deserved to be mourned. Because—" He broke off, looking away. "Because I'm the only one who knows their names." Something cracked inside Lorean's chest, something she'd kept frozen for 7 years.
She took another step closer. They were nearly touching now, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the pulse jumping in his throat. "I feel it too," she said. "The bond. I don't know how it's possible. I don't know what it means, but I feel it." Willard's eyes met hers, and the intensity in them nearly knocked her backward. "Your Majesty." Lorean. The name felt strange on her tongue. She hadn't let anyone use it in years.
When we're alone, you call me Lorean. Lorean. The way he said it, soft, reverent, like a prayer, made her knees weak. What do you want from me? Everything. Nothing. She didn't know. I want, she started, then froze. A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness beyond the garden wall, movement in the shadows. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. They weren't alone. Willard sensed it too. His body went rigid, his head turning toward the sound. When he looked back at her, his eyes had changed. Darker, wilder. For just a moment, something ancient and powerful flickered across his face. Then it was gone. Someone's watching us, he murmured. Lorean's mind raced. Diana's warning echoed. The council is already restless. Go, she commanded. Now, back to the servants' quarters. Say nothing to anyone. But that's an order, Ashford. He hesitated, conflict written across his features. Then he bowed, that same jerky, uncomfortable movement, and disappeared into the shadows. Lorean stood alone in the garden, her heart pounding. She turned slowly, scanning the darkness beyond the wall. Whoever had been watching was gone now, but they'd been there, they'd seen, and in the Game of Thrones, being seen was the same as being vulnerable. Lorean walked back to the palace, her mind spinning with contingencies and threats. She'd been careless, reckless, she'd let her guard down for one moment, and now she stopped dead in the middle of the courtyard. On the steps leading to her chambers, illuminated by torchlight, was a single black rose, the kind that only grew in one place, the Shadowlands, where the dark witches made their home. Attached to the stem was a note written in blood-red ink. The widow plays with fire. Fire burns. Sleep well, Your Majesty. The black rose sat on Lorean's desk like a coiled serpent. She'd been staring at it for 3 hours, dissecting every implication, every threat. Someone knew about Willard. Someone was watching, and someone wanted her afraid. They'd succeeded. But fear made Lorraine Silvercrest dangerous, not weak. She burned the note, ground the rose to ash, and doubled her guard. Then she did exactly what her enemies wouldn't expect. She kept seeing Willard. Every evening at twilight, she walked the gardens, and every evening he was there. What started as defiance became something else entirely. 5 miles away, in the eastern tower of the palace, the High Council gathered in secret. Lord Chancellor Marcus Stonefang stood at the head of the table, a mountain of a man with silver hair and eyes like chips of flint. Around him sat 4 other alphas, each one commanding territories that bordered Lorraine's kingdom, each one hungry for more power. 7 years, Marcus said, his voice like grinding stone. 7 years without a king. 7 years of a woman sitting on the throne alone, making decisions that should require male counsel. The bloodline is weakening. She's untouchable, muttered Alpha Gregor Blackthorn, a scarred veteran with one milky eye. No one can challenge her directly. She's too powerful, too cunning. Then we don't challenge her directly. Marcus leaned forward, candlelight casting demonic shadows across his face. We manufacture a crisis, something that requires immediate military intervention, something she can't handle alone. What kind of crisis? Asked Lady Helena Thornwood, the only female on the council, and the most ruthless. Marcus smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The border villages. We have contacts among the rogue packs, a few well-placed attacks, some dead civilians, maybe a burned settlement or two. The people will scream for protection, for a king to lead the armies. And when she refuses to marry? Then we declare her unfit, vote her out, install one of us as regent until she comes to her senses. Marcus's eyes glittered with malice.
The council has that power. We've just been too intimidated to use it. There's another problem, Alpha Desmond Ashworth quietly said. The groundskeeper. The room went silent. What about him? Marcus demanded. She's been seen with him, multiple times, in the private gardens, alone, at night. Helena laughed, a cruel tinkling sound. A disgraced rogue? That's even better. We can use this. Paint her as compromised, bewitched, unfit to rule because she's spreading her legs for palace help. Careful, Marcus warned, though his expression said he agreed. But yes, the groundskeeper is leverage. If we can prove an inappropriate relationship, we can force her hand. She either marries one of us to save face, or we remove her for moral corruption. And if she fights back? Gregor asked. Marcus's hand moved to the hilt of his sword. Then we remind her that queens bleed just like anyone else. Lorean didn't know about the council meeting, but she felt the danger closing in like wolves circling wounded prey. She found Willard in the memorial gardens at dusk, exactly as she'd expected. He was planting new bulbs, winter crocuses that would bloom when the snow melted. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, gentle and sure. "You'll wear out those roses if you keep visiting," he said without looking up. "Maybe I'm not here for the roses." That made him pause. He glanced up at her, something vulnerable flickering in his earth-brown eyes. "Then why are you here, your mad—" Lorean. She didn't have a good answer, or rather, she had too many answers and none of them were safe to speak aloud. "I needed air," she said instead. "The palace is suffocating." "Then sit." He gestured to a stone bench beside him. "I won't bite." Lorean sat. They worked in comfortable silence, him planting, her watching. The mate bond hummed between them, a living thing that grew stronger with each passing day. She wondered if he felt it as acutely as she did, the pull, the rightness of being near him. "Let me help," she said suddenly. Willard blinked. "You want to plant bulbs?" "Why not? I'm not completely useless outside a throne room." A smile tugged at his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. "All right, here." He handed her a trowel and a handful of bulbs. "Dig a hole about 4 inches deep, plant them pointy side up." Lorean took the trowel and immediately jabbed it into frozen earth with too much force. The blade skidded sideways and sliced across her palm. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin. "Damn it." "Don't move." Willard was beside her in an instant. He took her injured hand in both of his, examining the cut with a healer's careful eye. His touch was warm, calloused, impossibly gentle. "It's not deep. Hold still." He pulled a clean cloth from his pocket and wrapped it around her palm, his fingers working with surprising skill. Lorean couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The mate bond roared at his proximity, at his hands on her skin, at the care in every movement. "You've done this before," she managed. "I was Beta. I learned field medicine. Comes in handy when you're stubborn enough to garden in winter." "I'm not stubborn." "You're sitting in a frozen garden planting bulbs you don't need to plant. That's the definition of stubborn." But he smiled as he said it, tying off the makeshift bandage with practiced ease. He didn't let go of her hand. They sat there, fingers intertwined, the bandage between them. Lorean's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane, reckless, dangerous. She didn't pull away. "Willard," she heard herself whisper, "that scar on your chest, the one I saw the other night when you were working, where did it come from?" His smile died. His hand tightened around hers, not painfully, but like she was an anchor in rough seas. "You don't want to know." "I do." He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he unbuttoned the top of his workshirt, pulled the fabric aside. There, over his heart, was a jagged scar, the kind left by claws. "This," he said, his voice hollow, "is from the last pup I pulled from the rubble at Black Hollow. Her name was Eliza. She was 6 years old. She died in my arms while I tried to stop the bleeding. Lorraine's breath caught. She reached out without thinking and pressed her palm against the scar, against his heart. She could feel it beating beneath her hand, strong, steady, alive. My mate died too, she whispered, but he didn't die honorably. He died a traitor. He betrayed me to the council, tried to use our bond to control me. When I found out, she closed her eyes, I had him executed, and I've spent 7 years telling myself I did the right thing. Did you? I don't know anymore. Willard covered her hand with his own, pressing it harder against his chest. We're both ghosts, aren't we? Walking around, breathing, but not really alive. Yes, the word came out broken. Yes. He leaned closer. So did she. The space between them narrowed to nothing, just breath and heartbeat and the terrifying possibility of something neither of them thought they deserved. Willard. The garden gate crashed open. Diana Ravenclaw stood there, her face white as snow, her breath coming in gasps like she'd been running. Your Majesty, the border village of Thornhaven, it's been attacked, burned to the ground. There are no survivors.
Lorean shot to her feet, her hand falling away from Willard's chest. What? When? 2 hours ago. A rogue pack. They're demanding you surrender or they'll burn every village between here and the capital. No, this was wrong. Rogues didn't organize like this, didn't make demands. This was the council. She knew it in her bones. Mobilize the guard, Lorean commanded. I'm riding out at dawn. Your Majesty, the council is demanding an emergency session. They want to discuss alternative leadership. They're saying this proves you need a king consort to... I need nothing from those vultures. Lorian's voice cracked like a whip. Tell them I'll deal with the rogues first, then I'll deal with them. Diana bowed and ran. Lorean turned back to Willard. He was standing now, his shirt still unbuttoned, his eyes dark with something she couldn't name. This is a trap, he said quietly. I know. They're going to use this against you, force you to marry, or worse. I know. Then don't go. Send the guard. Stay here, where I'm safe? Lorean laughed bitterly. I'm the queen, Willard. I don't get to be safe. I get to be strong. She started toward the gate, then stopped, turned back. Come with me, she said. Tomorrow, ride with the guard. I'm not a soldier. I don't care. I want you there. I need... She caught herself, swallowed the words. Just come. Before he could answer, she left. She didn't see the figure watching from the tower window, didn't see Marcus Stonefang smile as he turned to the other council members gathered in the darkness. Perfect, he murmured. She's taking the bait, and she's bringing her little pet with her. How convenient. He gestured to a cloaked figure in the corner, a woman with silver eyes and shadows curling around her fingers like smoke. You know what to do, my lord. When they reach the village, you trigger the curse. Kill the groundskeeper. Make it look like the rogues did it. She'll be broken, vulnerable, easy to control. The witch smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. Consider it done, my lord. Thornhaven was still burning when they arrived. The village was nothing but charred skeletons of houses and smoke that clawed at the sky like dying fingers. Bodies lay scattered in the snow, men, women, children. The rogues had been thorough, brutal, efficient. Too efficient, Lorean thought as she dismounted. This wasn't random violence. This was a massacre designed to send a message. Behind her, 200 royal guards spread out in formation, and beside her, looking pale but determined, was Willard. She'd given him a sword he clearly didn't know how to use, and armor that hung awkwardly on his frame. He looked like a man dressed for his own funeral. Stay close to me, Lorean commanded. If fighting starts... I know, stay out of the way. His jaw clenched. I'm not a warrior, Lorean. I don't know why you brought me. Because I can't breathe when you're not near me, she thought, but didn't say. Because the mate bond is driving me insane, and I'd rather have you where I can see you than leave you vulnerable at the palace.
"Just stay alive," she said instead. A howl split the air, long, mournful, threatening, then another, then another. The rogues emerged from the tree line like ghosts made flesh, 30 of them, 40, 50, all shifted into wolf form, their eyes glowing with bloodlust, foam dripping from their jaws. This wasn't a raid, this was an army. "Shields!" Lorean roared. Her guards locked into defensive formation. She drew her sword, a blade of folded steel that had tasted the blood of 100 enemies. "Hold the line!" The rogues charged. The battle was chaos incarnate. Steel met claw, teeth tore through armor, blood painted the white snow crimson. Lorean fought like a demon unleashed, her blade a silver blur, every strike precise and lethal. She was grace and violence, a queen who'd earned her crown in blood. She killed 3 rogues in as many seconds, her movements almost too fast to follow. The mate bond thrummed with battle fury, sharpening her senses, making her faster, stronger. She could feel Willard behind her, unarmed and terrified, but still standing. Then she heard it, a child's scream. Her head whipped around. At the edge of the village, a little girl, maybe 5 years old, covered in soot and blood, had crawled from underneath a collapsed building, and charging straight for her was a massive rogue, its jaws open wide enough to swallow the child whole. Lorean was too far away. Her guards were engaged. No one could reach the girl in time. "No!" The roar came from Willard. He ran, not away from the danger, toward it. His legs pumped, his breath came in ragged gasps. He was going to die. They both knew it. A groundskeeper with no training couldn't fight a rogue alpha, but he ran anyway. The rogue's jaws were inches from the child when Willard threw himself between them. "Get down!" he screamed at the girl. She dropped. The rogue's teeth closed on empty air and on Willard's outstretched arm. Bone crunched, blood sprayed. Willard screamed in agony. And then the world exploded. Shadows erupted from Willard's body like a shockwave, thick, viscous darkness that didn't just block out the light, but consumed it. The air temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Lorean's breath frosted. The rogue attacking Willard yelped and tried to pull away. It was too late. The shadows coalesced around Willard, wrapping him in a cocoon of living darkness. His body convulsed, changed, grew. When the shadows peeled back, what stood in his place was no longer entirely human. He was massive, 8 feet tall, his body a grotesque fusion of man and wolf. But wrong. His fur was black as midnight and seemed to shift and writhe like it was made of shadow itself. His eyes burned with crimson fire. His claws were obsidian blades that dripped darkness like blood. This wasn't a normal wolf shift. This was something ancient, something that shouldn't exist. The Shadow Walker threw back its head and roared, a sound that made reality itself shudder. Every rogue in the vicinity froze, their instincts screaming at them to run, to submit, to do anything but face this apex predator. The rogue that had bitten Willard didn't get the chance to flee. The Shadow Walker moved with impossible speed. One moment it was standing over the child, the next it had the rogue by the throat, lifting the massive wolf off the ground like it weighed nothing. Shadows poured from the Shadow Walker's claws, burrowing into the rogue's body like parasites. The rogue's howl of pain cut off abruptly. Its body withered, desiccated. In seconds it was nothing but a dried husk that crumbled to ash. The Shadow Walker dropped the remains and turned on the other rogues. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. The Shadow Walker tore through the enemy forces like a force of nature. Claws ripped, shadows consumed. Rogues that had been bloodthirsty killers moments ago now ran screaming, their tails between their legs, their minds shattered by primal terror. In less than 2 minutes, the battlefield was silent except for the crackling of dying fires and the whimpering of wounded guards. The Shadow Walker stood in the center of the carnage, its chest heaving, shadows still writhing around its form like living serpents. Then it looked at the little girl cowering in the snow. Its burning eyes softened slightly, the shadows receded slightly. It took one step toward her, and collapsed. The massive form shrank, the shadows dissipating like smoke. When they cleared, Willard lay in the blood-soaked snow, naked and unconscious, his body covered in strange black markings that pulsed with faint light. Willard? Lorean was running before she realized she'd moved. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands hovering over his body, not knowing where to touch, how to help. "Willard, wake up! Wake up!" His chest rose and fell, barely. His heartbeat was erratic, weak. He was dying. "Medic!" Lorean screamed. "Get me a healer now!" Diana appeared at her side, her face ashen. "Your Majesty, we need to move. More rogues could—" "I'm not leaving him." "Lorean!" "That's an order." They transported Willard back to the palace on a stretcher. Lorean rode beside him the entire way, her hand clutched in his, feeling his life force flickering like a candle in a storm. The council was waiting when they arrived. Marcus Stonefang stood at the palace entrance, his expression a careful mask of concern that didn't reach his eyes. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "we heard about the attack. Thank the gods you're safe. But I must ask, what is that creature you've brought back?" "A hero who saved lives while you sat here counting your gold." "But Your Majesty, the power it displayed, that's not natural, that's—" "Not now." Each word was sharpened to a blade's edge. "Get out of my way before I add you to the casualty list." Marcus stepped aside, but his eyes never left Willard's unconscious form, and in those eyes Lorean saw calculation, hunger, fear. Willard didn't wake for 3 days. Lorean stayed at his bedside the entire time, ignoring council meetings, ignoring state business, ignoring Diana's increasingly desperate pleas for her to at least sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him running toward that rogue, saw him choosing certain death to save a child, saw the shadows consuming him, transforming him into something that shouldn't exist. The palace healers had no explanation. The markings on his skin, intricate patterns that looked like ancient runes, defied all medical knowledge. His vital signs fluctuated wildly. Sometimes his body temperature dropped so low he should have been dead. Other times it spiked high enough to boil water. He was caught between forms, between life and death, between human and something else entirely. On the 3rd night, Lorean was half asleep in the chair beside his bed when his hand twitched in hers. Her eyes snapped open. "Willard?" His eyelids fluttered, opened. Those earth-browned eyes stared up at her, confused and frightened. "Lorean?" His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. What happened?" Relief crashed over her so hard she nearly sobbed. Instead, she squeezed his hand harder. "You saved that little girl. You were magnificent and terrifying, and you nearly died, you absolute idiot." Memory flickered across his face. Horror followed. "The shadows. I felt them. They were inside me."
They were... He tried to sit up, panic rising. "What am I? What the hell am I?" Lorean pressed him back down gently. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." "I'm a monster!" His voice broke. "You saw what I did. I tore them apart. I enjoyed it. I could feel their fear, and I—" "You saved innocence," Lorean interrupted firmly. "You did what needed to be done. That doesn't make you a monster." "Then what doesn't make me?" She looked at him. This broken, beautiful man who'd thrown himself into death to save a stranger. This man whose darkness called to her own. "It makes you mine," she whispered. Before he could respond, the door burst open. Diana stood there, her face grave. "Your Majesty, the council has called an emergency vote. They're invoking the ancient laws. They claim you've been compromised by dark magic. They're demanding you either execute the Groundskeeper as a threat to the realm." She paused, her voice dropping to barely audible. "Or marry Lord Marcus Stonefang within the week to prove your loyalty to the kingdom." The room went deathly silent. Lorean's hand tightened around Willard's until her knuckles went white. "They're giving me an ultimatum," she said softly. "Kill you or marry my enemy." "Then kill me," Willard said immediately. "Don't throw away your crown for—"
"No! Lorean! I said no!" She stood, her eyes blazing with a fury that made Diana take a step back. "They think they can control me? They think they can force my hand?" She looked down at Willard, and something in her expression made him go still. "I have a third option," Lorean said, "one they won't see coming." "What option?" Diana asked carefully. Lorean smiled. It was the smile of a queen who just declared war. "I'm going to find out exactly what Willard is, and then I'm going to use that power to burn Marcus Stonefang and his entire conspiracy to ash." She turned back to Diana. "Get me every text in the Forbidden Archives, every legend about shadow magic, every myth about impossible transformations, and do it quietly. If the council finds out what I'm planning..." A bell began tolling, deep, resonant, the alarm bell that only rang for one reason: invasion. All three of them froze. "That's impossible," Diana breathed. "The borders are..." Another bell joined the first, then another, the entire palace warning system erupting in cacophony. A guard burst through the door, his armor splashed with fresh blood. "Your Majesty, the Western Gate, something's coming through. Not rogues, something else. They're tearing through the defenses like paper." He never finished the sentence. Shadows exploded through the window behind him. Not natural shadows. These moved with intelligence, with malice. They wrapped around the guard's throat and squeezed. His scream cut off with a wet gurgle. His body dropped. The shadows coalesced into a figure, a woman with silver eyes and a smile like a knife wound. The Dark Witch from the council's tower. "Hello, Your Majesty. Lord Stonefang sends his regards and a message. Surrender the Shadow Walker or watch your kingdom burn." Her eyes shifted to Willard, and her smile widened. "Hello, little prince. Your family sends their love. They've missed you, ever since we slaughtered them 50 years ago." "What?" The witch laughed. "You really don't remember, do you? What you are, what you were. Oh, this is delicious. The last Shadow Walker heir reduced to playing in gardens." "Get out," Saren snarled, stepping between the witch and Willard. "Or I'll..." "You'll what? You're strong, little queen, but you're not strong enough, not for what's coming." The witch's form began dissolving back into shadows. 3 days. That's how long you have before the Shadowlands army reaches your walls. 3 days to decide. Give us the boy or die defending him." She vanished, leaving only the echo of laughter and the corpse of the guard. Lorean turned slowly to Willard. He was sitting up now, despite his wounds, his face a mask of shock and confusion. "Shadow Walker heir?" he whispered. I'm not..." "We need answers, now. Diana, the archives, everything about Shadow Walkers, their history, their bloodlines, everything." "Your Majesty, if they're coming in 3 days..." "Then we have 3 days to figure out what Willard is and how to weaponize it." She looked at Willard, and in her eyes was a fierceness that took his breath away. "Because I'm not giving you to them. I'm not marrying Marcus, and I'm sure as hell not letting them take my kingdom." She held out her hand to him. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Willard stared at her hand, at this queen who should have been his enemy, who should have executed him the moment he manifested that unholy power. This woman who instead was willing to risk everything to protect him. He took her hand. "I trust you." "Good." She pulled him to his feet. "Because we're about to start a war, and I'm going to need my monster." Outside, the alarm bells continued to toll, and in the darkness beyond the palace walls, an army of shadows began to march. The Forbidden Archives smelled like ancient dust and secrets that wanted to stay buried. Lorean descended the spiral stone stairs with Diana at her side, their footsteps echoing in the suffocating darkness. Behind them, locked in her private chambers under guard, Willard waited, still weak, still covered in those pulsing black markings, still terrified of what he'd become.
3 days. They had 3 days before an army of darkness reached her walls. "Here," Diana said, unlocking a vault door sealed with iron and old magic. The restricted histories, everything deemed too dangerous for common knowledge. The room beyond was vast, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound tomes and scrolls yellowed with age. Lorean began pulling books at random, scanning titles, searching for anything about shadow walkers. Most were dead ends, myths, fairy tales meant to scare children. Then Diana's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. "Lorean, look at this." She held a massive tome bound in black leather, its cover embossed with a symbol that made Lorean's blood run cold. A wolf made of shadows, its eyes twin moons, surrounded by darkness that seemed to move even in the still illustration. The crest of House Ashford, Willard's family crest. Diana opened the book with trembling hands. The first page was a family tree, branches spreading across centuries. And there, at the very top, in silver ink that gleamed like moonlight, the Shadow Walker bloodline, Royal House of Ashford, rulers of the Shadowlands. "Gods," Lorean breathed. "He's not just any wolf, he's royalty." Diana's finger traced down the family tree, past dozens of names, until it reached the bottom. The last entry, written 50 years ago, King Aldrich Ashford and Queen Morgana, executed during the Purge. Heir, Prince Willard Ashford, age 7, status unknown. "He was 7 years old," Lorean whispered. "When they killed his family, he was just a child." Diana flipped pages, revealing the history written in cramped, urgent script. The Shadow Walkers were the oldest bloodline in existence. They could walk through shadows, travel between darkness as easily as breathing, control shadow magic that made them nearly invincible. But their most unique power, she tapped a passage, they could complete broken mate bonds. Lorean's world tilted. What? Most mates bond once. When that mate dies, the bond dies. But Shadow Walkers could forge new bonds, heal what was broken. They were the only bloodline capable of it. Diana looked up, her eyes sharp with understanding. "That's why you felt the mate bond with him. Your bond with Matthias was severed, but Willard's power, dormant as it was, called to that broken piece of you." Lorean's hand went to her chest, feeling the mate bond pulse beneath her ribs. All this time, she'd thought it was impossible, a cruel joke, but it was real. It was him. "Why were they killed?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because they were too powerful, too dangerous." Diana's voice hardened. 50 years ago, the other royal houses formed a secret alliance. They called it the Purge. They systematically hunted down every Shadow Walker, men, women, children, slaughtered them in their beds, burned their cities, salted the earth so nothing would grow. Who led it? Diana flipped to another page, a list of names, signatures on an execution order. Lorean's blood turned to ice. At the top of the list, Lord Marcus Stonefang, Lord Chancellor, the same Marcus who now demanded she marry him or die, the same council that had been plotting against her. "It's the same people," Lorean said, her voice shaking with rage. "The same families. Marcus's grandfather led the Purge, and now Marcus is trying to finish what they started." "There's more," Diana said, her face grim. She pulled out another document, this one more recent, 7 years old. "The massacre of Black Hollow. I had my people dig into the old reports. The Alpha who ordered the territorial expansion, he didn't ignore Willard's advice. He was following it." "What?" "The Alpha received intelligence, false intelligence, claiming the pass was safe. That intelligence came from an advisor placed in the pack by..." Diana's finger stabbed at a name on the document, Marcus Stonefang. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity.
They knew, Lorean breathed. They knew Willard was alive. They'd been searching for him for decades. When they finally found him, they couldn't kill him directly. He was too well protected by his pack. So they engineered the massacre, killed everyone who knew his identity, left him alive, but broken, guilty, so traumatized he'd never access his powers. And it worked, Diana said quietly. Until 3 days ago, when his powers manifested to save that child. Now they know he's active, dangerous, and they're coming to finish what they started 50 years ago. Lorean's hands clenched into fists. All of it, Willard's guilt, his self-hatred, his belief that he was responsible for 200 deaths, was a lie, a manipulation. They'd used his trauma as a cage. I have to tell him. Lorean, if you tell him the truth, and he deserves to know, if you tell him he's the heir to a murdered bloodline, that his entire life has been a lie, that he's being hunted by the same people who slaughtered his family. Diana grabbed her arm. He's barely holding on as it is. This could break him. Or it could save him. Lorean pulled free. His power, his birthright, his future, they all belong to him, not to me, not to Marcus, him. She climbed the stairs, her mind racing. Behind her, Diana whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Lorean found Willard standing at her chamber window, staring out at the darkness beyond the palace walls. He'd dressed in simple clothes, the black markings on his skin visible where his shirt hung open. They pulsed faintly with his heartbeat, beautiful and terrible. "They're out there," he said without turning. "I can feel them, the shadows. They're calling to me, telling me to come home. Willard, I'm dangerous, Lorean. You should send me away. Give them to me. Save your kingdom. No, I'm not worth a war. You are worth everything." The words tore out of her, "and I can prove it."
She set the book on her desk, open to the family tree. Look at what you really are." Willard approached slowly, his eyes scanning the page. She watched his face as comprehension dawned, watched shock, denial, horror. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not. I'm not. You are Prince Willard Ashford, heir to the Shadow Walker bloodline, the last of a royal house that was murdered 50 years ago by the same council that's hunting you now." "That's impossible. I would remember." "You were 7. They slaughtered your family. You survived. Someone, your parents, a loyal servant, someone hid you, gave you a new identity, made you believe you were just a beta of a minor pack." Lorean's voice cracked. "And 7 years ago, when Marcus finally found you, he engineered that massacre to kill everyone who knew the truth." Willard stumbled backward. No, I was responsible. I failed to stop." "You were the target." Lorean grabbed his shoulders. "They killed 200 wolves to get to you, to break you, to make sure you'd never access your power, because they're terrified of what you could become." Tears streamed down Willard's face. "They died protecting me?" "Yes." "All of them? The children? Eliza?" "All of them." A sound tore from his throat, grief and rage and anguish mixed into something inhuman. The shadows in the room responded, surging from corners, writhing like living things. The temperature dropped, frost spread across the windows. "Willard, breathe." "I could have saved them." His voice echoed with power, doubled, tripled, as if a dozen voices spoke at once. "If I'd known what I was, if I'd been able to control this, I could have—" "You were hiding. You were surviving. There is no shame in that. They died for nothing. They died for you." Lorean grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "They died so you could live, so you could stand here right now and become what they knew you were meant to be. And if you give up, if you let Marcus win, then yes, they died for nothing. But if you fight, if you claim your birthright and burn those bastards to ash, then their deaths mean something."
Willard's eyes blazed crimson. The shadows around him coalesced, forming shapes, wolves, warriors, ghosts of the past. "I don't know how to control it," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to be what you're asking." "Then learn. We have 3 days. I have the texts, Diana has the histories, and I have the mate bond. Shadow Walker power grows through connection, through the bond. If we complete it fully, you'll have access to everything, all the power your ancestors wielded. That's permanent. I know. You'd be binding yourself to me, to this," he gestured at the shadows, at himself, "to a monster who doesn't even know his own name. You're not a monster, you're a king. I'm broken. So am I," Lorean's voice softened. "I've been broken since Matthias betrayed me. I thought I'd never feel whole again. But then I met you, this infuriating, self-sacrificing man who tends graves and saves children and thinks he's worthless. And for the first time in 7 years, I felt like maybe I could be something other than the widow of winter." She took his hand, pressed it against her heart. "You're not broken, Willard. You're surviving, just like me. And maybe that's enough. Maybe 2 broken people can make something whole." He stared at her, shadows and man warring in his expression. "If we do this, if we complete the bond, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me forever, even if I know the risks. I'm choosing them anyway." "Why?" "Because you're mine." The words came out fierce, possesses, "and I protect what's mine, even from themselves." Willard opened his mouth to respond. The window exploded inward, glass rained down like diamonds. Through the shattered opening came shadows, thick, malevolent, moving with terrifying intelligence. And riding those shadows, surrounded by an army of darkness, was the silver-eyed witch. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, wreathed in shadow and malice, stood Marcus Stonefang. But wrong, changed. His eyes glowed with the same silver light as the witch's, and shadows poured from his mouth when he smiled. "Hello, old friend," Marcus said to Willard, his voice layered with something ancient and evil. "Did you really think you were the last Shadow Walker prince? We've been studying your bloodline for 50 years, learning your secrets, stealing your power." He raised his hands. Shadows erupted from his palms, crude, unstable, but undeniably real. "Synthetic shadow walkers," the witch purred, "made from the blood of your slaughtered family. Not as powerful as the real thing, but close. And Marcus here has been infused with enough to make him very dangerous." Lorean drew her sword. "Get out of my palace." "Oh, we're not here for the palace, little queen. We're here for him. And this time, we're not leaving without the last Shadow Walker prince, dead or alive." He lunged. Willard threw himself in front of Lorean, shadows exploding from his body in defense, and the world went black. The darkness swallowed everything. When Lorean's vision cleared, she was on the floor, her ears ringing, her sword knocked from her hand. Above her, Willard and Marcus circled each other like wolves preparing to tear throats. But Marcus's shadows were wrong, corrupted, twitching with unnatural energy, like a poison mimicking medicine. Willard's shadows were pure, instinctive, lethal. "You're weak," Marcus taunted, his voice distorted. "Untrained, a prince playing at gardening while we perfected what your family died protecting." "They didn't die protecting power," Willard snarled, his form shifting, growing. "They died protecting me." He launched himself at Marcus with inhuman speed. Their collision sent shockwaves through the room. Stone cracked, furniture exploded. The witch cackled and sent shadow tendrils toward Lorean. Diana burst through the door with 10 guards, blades drawn. "Protect the queen!" The room became chaos. Guards engaged the witch. Diana threw daggers that sang through the air. But Marcus and Willard were a blur of darkness and violence, so fast Lorean could barely track them. Then Marcus made a mistake. He went for Lorean. Willard's roar shook the palace foundations. He didn't just shift, he erupted. The Shadow Walker form consumed him entirely. 8 feet of living darkness and rage. He caught Marcus mid-lunge, slamming him into the stone wall so hard the impact created a crater. "You want her?" Willard's voice was layered, demonic, beautiful. "You go through me first." His claws closed around Marcus's throat. Shadows poured into Marcus's mouth, choking him, consuming the synthetic power from the inside out. Marcus screamed. His stolen shadows began eating him alive, turning on their host like rabid dogs. "Retreat!" the witch shrieked. She grabbed what was left of Marcus and dissolved into shadows, fleeing through the broken window. "This isn't over, Shadow Walker. We'll be back with an army you can't stop." Then they were gone. Willard stood in the wreckage, his Shadow Walker form slowly receding, leaving him naked and shaking in the center of destroyed furniture and cracked stone. Blood, not his own, dripped from his claws. "Everybody, out," Lorean commanded. Her voice was ice. "Now." Diana hesitated. "Your Majesty." "Out!" They fled. The door slammed shut. Lorean walked to Willard on unsteady legs. He was staring at his hands, at the blood on them, his expression one of absolute horror. "I almost killed him," he whispered. "I wanted to. Gods, Lorean, I wanted to rip him apart." "Good." She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "He tried to kill you. He's been hunting you your entire life. You had every right." "No." Willard shoved her away, stumbling backward. "Don't you see? I'm exactly what they feared. A monster who enjoys violence, who craves blood. They were right to hunt us. We're—" "Stop it!" Lorean's slap echoed through the room. Willard's head snapped sideways, shock replacing horror. "Stop punishing yourself for surviving. Stop apologizing for having power. They made you hate yourself because a man who knows his worth is dangerous to tyrants. You don't understand. I understand perfectly." Her voice cracked. "Do you know why I trust you with the truth? Why I'm not terrified of your power like everyone else?" She stepped closer, into his space, her eyes blazing. "Because I know what it's like to carry guilt that was never yours. Matthias, my mate, I thought he betrayed me because he was weak, because he wanted power more than he loved me. I executed him believing he chose ambition over our bond." Her hands were shaking now. "But he didn't betray me by choice. The council poisoned him, slowly, over months. They used dark magic to corrupt his mind, to make him pliable. They wanted to control me through him, and when he fought back, when he tried to warn me—" Her voice broke. "They killed him and made it look like execution was my idea." Willard's eyes widened. "Lorean, I killed my mate for crimes he didn't commit." The words tore out of her like shrapnel. "I've spent 7 years ruling through fear and isolation because I thought love made me weak, because I thought needing anyone was the same as being controlled. I became exactly what they wanted, alone, paranoid, cruel." Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. "So don't you dare tell me I don't understand guilt. Don't tell me I don't know what it's like to be used, manipulated, turned into a weapon against the people I love." She grabbed his bloodied hands. "We've both been lied to, both been caged by manufactured guilt, both been made into monsters by people who profit from our self-hatred. But I'm done. I'm done letting them win." Willard stared at her, his own tears cutting tracks through his blood on his face. How do we stop them?" "We become what they fear most, a Shadow Walker and his bonded mate, unified, unstoppable, everything they tried to prevent." "The bond," he whispered. "You want to complete it?" I want to choose it, not because fate demands it, not because politics require it, but because you," her voice softened to something raw and vulnerable, "you see me, Willard, not the queen, not the widow, not the weapon, me. And I see you, not the prince, not the monster, not the guilt, just you. I'm broken. So am I. Maybe we can be broken together. Maybe that's enough." Willard searched her face, looking for doubt, for manipulation, for anything that would confirm his worst fears about himself. He found only fierce, terrifying honesty. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Why do you trust me with this? With you?" Lorean smiled, sad and real, and more vulnerable than she'd been in 7 years. "Because you're the first person who didn't want something from me. You didn't want my crown, my power, my body as a trophy. You just wanted to tend your roses and be left alone." She leaned her forehead against his. "You didn't see a queen to conquer. You saw a woman standing in a garden, and you offered her silence, peace, truth. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I'm nobody. You're the heir to a murdered kingdom, the last Shadow Walker prince, the only man who's made me feel human in 7 years. Her hands cupped his face. "You're not nobody, Willard Ashford. You're mine, if you'll have me."
The mate bond between them flared, white-hot and undeniable. Willard's breath hitched. His shadows responded, no longer violent but protective, wrapping around them both like a cocoon. "I'm terrified," he admitted, "of what I am, of what I could become, of losing control and hurting you." "Then we'll be terrified together." Lorean's thumb traced his cheekbone. "And if you lose control, I'll pull you back. That's what mates do. That's what partners do. We don't run from each other's darkness. We stand in it together." Willard closed his eyes. A single tear escaped. "I don't deserve." "Neither do I. But maybe that's not the point." She kissed his forehead, gentle and reverent. "Maybe the point is choosing to try anyway." For a long moment they just stood there, 2 broken people holding each other in the wreckage, surrounded by shadows that no longer felt like enemies, but like home. Then Willard pulled back. His eyes, when they opened, were different, clearer, determined. "If we're doing this," he said, his voice steady for the first time since she'd met him, "if we're really going to fight them, to become what they fear, I need to know everything, every secret, every truth you've been hiding. Even the ugly ones? Especially those." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We're being honest now, remember? No more lies, no more cages." Lorean nodded. She took his hand and led him to the shattered window. Outside, darkness had fallen completely, and in that darkness she could see lights moving, torches, hundreds of them, forming a ring around the palace. "They're already here," she whispered. "Marcus retreated, but the Shadowlands army is at our walls. We have hours, not days. Then we don't have time for the archives, for research, for planning." Willard's jaw clenched. "We need power, now." "The bond," Lorean said. "If we complete it, body, soul, everything, you'll have access to your full strength. But Willard, it's permanent, irrevocable. Once we do this—" "I know." He turned to face her, and in his eyes was something she'd never seen before, certainty. "I spent 7 years punishing myself for surviving. I'm done with that. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die fighting for something that matters." He took her hand. "You matter, Lorean. This, us, matters. So yes, complete the bond. Make me yours, and we'll burn them all." Lorean's heart hammered. This was it. The point of no return. She could see Diana's warning in her mind. Once you complete that bond, there's no going back. But when she looked at Willard, this man who'd thrown himself into death for strangers, who carried guilt that wasn't his, who saw her as human when everyone else saw only power, she knew. She'd already made her choice the moment their eyes met in that throne room. "Then we do it now, before they attack, before we lose the chance. We bond and we fight."
Willard's hand tightened on hers. How? Lorean pulled him toward her bed, the only piece of furniture that hadn't been destroyed in the fight. The old way. Body and soul, blood and shadow. You open yourself to me, and I open myself to you, and we let the bond do the rest. She began unlacing her gown, her hands surprisingly steady. Willard's breath caught as the fabric fell away, revealing skin marked with old scars, evidence of battles fought and survived. "You're sure?" His voice was rough. "Once we start, the bond won't let us stop. It'll demand completion." "I'm sure." She reached for his shirt, pulling it over his head. The black markings on his skin pulsed faster, responding to her touch. "Are you?" Instead of answering, Willard kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate, fierce. 7 years of loneliness and pain poured into a single moment of connection. Lorean gasped into his mouth, the mate bond roaring to life between them, flooding her senses with his emotions, fear and hope, and terrible, overwhelming need. His shadows wrapped around them both, no longer threatening but protective, warm, home. They fell onto the bed together, hands exploring, barriers crumbling. This wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The bond between them strengthening with every touch, every kiss, every whispered truth. "I'm yours," breathed Willard against her throat. "Body and soul, shadow and light, everything I am is mine," Lorean finished, her nails digging into his shoulders as the bond tightened, fusing them together. "And everything I am is yours, now and forever, till death." The bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. Lorean screamed, not in pain, in overwhelming sensation. She could feel Willard's power flooding through her, dark and ancient and vast beyond comprehension, could feel his emotions, his love, his fear, his absolute devotion, could feel him, every thought, every memory, every shattered piece of his soul. And he could feel her, the Ice Queen melting, the walls crumbling, the woman beneath the crown, terrified and fierce, and choosing him anyway. Their powers merged, her tactical brilliance and his shadow magic, her political cunning and his raw violence, her iron control and his raw potential. They became something new, something the world had never seen, a fully bonded Shadow Walker king and his queen. The room exploded with light and darkness intertwined. The shadows in the corners roared to life, no longer Willard's alone, but theirs. The temperature dropped and rose simultaneously. Windows shattered. The door blew off its hinges. And when it was done, when they lay tangled together, gasping and forever changed, Willard's eyes opened, no longer earth brown, but glowing silver gold, the mark of a fully realized Shadow Walker. "I can feel it," he whispered, awe in his voice. "All of it, the power, the memories, my family, my kingdom, everything they stole from me, it's coming back." Lorean touched his face, feeling the bond thrumming between them like a second heartbeat. "Can you control it?" "With you? Yes." He kissed her palm. "You're my anchor, my center. As long as you're with me, I won't lose myself." A bell began tolling, the attack alarm. Diana's voice, magically amplified, echoed through the palace. "Your Majesty, they're breaching the walls. We need you now." Willard sat up, and Lorean felt his power rippling through the bond, no longer wild but focused, controlled, deadly. "Let them come," he said, his voice layered with shadow-touched resonance. "Let them see what they created." He stood, and shadows clothed him instantly, armor of living darkness, intricate and ancient, bearing the crest of House Ashford. A crown of shadow-forged metal appeared on his head, marking him as what he truly was, a king. Lorean rose beside him, and the bond responded to her as well. Her own armor formed, white silk and silver steel, marked with both the silver crest and the Ashford shadow wolf, 2 bloodlines, 2 kingdoms, 1 power. They walked to the shattered window hand in hand. Below, the Shadowlands army was pouring through breaches in the outer walls, thousands of corrupted shadow creatures, dark witches and synthetic shadow walkers. At their head, healed by dark magic and radiating stolen power, stood Marcus Stonefang. and beside him, wreathed in even darker shadows, was a figure Lorean didn't recognize, a woman in black robes, her face hidden, but her power unmistakable. The true leader of the Shadowlands, the architect of the Purge. Willard's hand tightened on hers. Through the bond, she felt his recognition, his horror. "That's impossible," he breathed. "She's dead. I watched her die 50 years ago when they killed my family." "Who's she?" Lorean demanded. Willard's voice was hollow. "My aunt, my father's sister, the one who betrayed the Shadow Walker royal family to the council, the one who sold us out for power." He looked at Lorean, his eyes burning with silver fire. "She's the reason I'm the last Shadow Walker, and she's come to finish what she started." The woman in black looked up at the shattered window. Even from a distance, Lorean could see her smile. "Hello, nephew," her voice carried on shadow-laced wind. "It's time to come home, time to die like the rest of your pathetic bloodline." She raised her hands. The uncorrupted shadow army surged forward as one, a tide of darkness that would drown everything in its path. Willard's shadows erupted from his body, massive and furious. "Then let's show her what happens when you betray family." He looked at Lorean. "Together?" She took his hand, feeling their combined power thrumming between them. Together, always. They jumped.
They didn't jump into the battle. They became it. Willard and Lorean hit the courtyard as a single entity, shadow and light, darkness and steel. The bond between them sang with perfectly synchronized power. Where Willard's shadows struck, Lorean's tactical mind guided them. Where Lorean's sword carved through enemies, Willard's power amplified every blow. They were magnificent, terrifying, unstoppable. The corrupted shadow creatures broke against them like waves against stone. Willard tore through ranks of synthetic shadow walkers, his true bloodline power making their stolen abilities look like cheap imitations. Lorean moved with lethal grace, her blade singing as it separated heads from bodies, her commands rallying the royal guard to defensive positions. But there were too many. For every enemy they killed, 3 more poured through the breached walls. And at the center of it all, Marcus Stonefang and the woman in black, Willard's aunt, stood untouched, watching with calculating eyes. "You've gotten stronger, nephew," the woman called out, her voice like poisoned honey. "The bond did that. How sweet. But you're still just a boy playing at king. I killed your father. I'll kill you too." She raised her hands. The shadows around her coalesced into something massive, a creature of pure darkness, 10 feet tall, all teeth and claws and malice. It roared and charged. Willard met it head-on. The impact sent shockwaves through the courtyard. Stone cracked. Guards were thrown backward. The creature's claws raked across Willard's shadow armor, drawing blood beneath. Through the bond, Lorean felt his pain, felt his rage, felt the monster inside him howling for vengeance. "Focus," she commanded through their link. "Don't let emotion control the power. Control the power." Willard's eyes flared silver. His shadows responded, no longer wild but precise. He wrapped them around the creature's throat and pulled. The monster dissolved into nothing, its stolen power unraveling. But the woman just laughed. Better, but not good enough. She snapped her fingers. 20 more shadow creatures erupted from the ground. "Lorean!" Diana's voice cut through the chaos. "The walls are failing. We need to fall back to the inner keep." "No." Lorean's voice was absolute. "We hold here. If they breach the inner keep, it's over." "Your Majesty, we can't." "We hold." But even as she said it, Lorean knew they were losing. The numbers were overwhelming. Her guards were exhausted. Willard was strong, but he was still learning his power, still adjusting to the bond. They needed something more. They needed a miracle. Marcus Stonefang stepped forward, his corrupted shadows writhing around him like serpents. "Enough games. I'll finish this myself." He moved faster than any human should, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat.
His shadow claws went straight for Lorean's throat, before Willard appeared between them, catching Marcus's wrist. "You want her? You go through me." "Gladly." Marcus's other hand shot forward, plunging shadow-wrapped fingers directly into Willard's chest. Through the bond, Lorean felt it, not just physical pain, but spiritual violation. Marcus was trying to rip out Willard's power at the source. "No!" Lorean's scream tore the night. She swung her blade in a desperate arc, forcing Marcus to pull back or lose his arm. But the damage was done. Willard collapsed, black blood pouring from the wound in his chest. Through the bond, she felt his life force flickering like a candle in a storm. "Willard!" She dropped beside him, pressing her hands to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't you dare!" "Touching," Marcus said, standing over them. "The queen brought low by love. How predictable, how weak." He raised his hand for the killing blow. Lorean looked up at him, and in her eyes was something Marcus had never seen before. Not fear, not defeat, pure, incandescent rage. "You want to see weak? Let me show you what love makes possible." She plunged her hand into Willard's wound chest, not to hurt, but to connect, through the bond, through their merged souls. She poured everything she had into him, her strength, her power, her very life force. "Take it," she commanded. "Take all of it, every piece of me. Use it." The bond exploded with light. Willard's eyes snapped open, no longer silver, but blazing white gold. His wounds began knitting closed, fueled by Lorean's sacrifice. His shadows erupted with such force that Marcus was thrown backward, slamming into the palace wall. Willard stood, and he was transcendent, no longer half-formed, no longer uncertain. He was the Shadow Walker King in full, ancient power channeled through modern fury, amplified by a mate bond that had become something unprecedented. "You made a mistake. You thought killing my family made you powerful, but all you did was make me an orphan with nothing left to lose." He raised his hands. Every shadow in the courtyard, every dark corner, every silhouette, every place light didn't reach, answered his call. They rose like a tsunami of darkness, towering over the battlefield. The enemies felt it too. For the first time, fear flickered across her face. "Impossible! You're untrained! You can't!" "I'm not untrained anymore." Willard's smile was terrible to behold. "I have 50 years of stolen memories. Every Shadow Walker you murdered, I can feel them, their knowledge, their power, and they all want the same thing." The shadows descended, not on the royal guard, not on Diana or the innocent, only on the corrupted, the shadow creatures, the synthetic walkers, the dark witches, Marcus, and the ant who'd betrayed everything. They screamed. Gods, how they screamed. The shadows didn't just kill, they unmade, unraveling stolen power, consuming corruption, reducing enemies to nothing but echoes and ash. In 30 seconds, the battle was over. The courtyard was silent except for the sound of wind through destroyed walls and the soft moaning of wounded guards. Willard stood at the center of it all, wreathed in shadows that slowly receded, returning to their natural places. When he turned to look at Lorean, his eyes were back to that earth-brown she'd fallen for, but they held new depths, grief and power and terrible understanding. "It's done," he said quietly. Lorean tried to stand. Her legs gave out. She'd given too much through the bond, pushed too far. Willard caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you." "The enemies?" "Gone. All of them. My aunt, Marcus, every corrupted thing they brought. I killed them all." "Good." Lorean touched his face with a trembling hand. "You did what needed doing." "I enjoyed it." The admission came out broken. "When I destroyed them, when I felt their fear, I enjoyed it. Because they tried to kill me, because they hunted you your entire life, because they murdered your family." She pressed her forehead to his. Vengeance isn't evil, Willard. It's human.
Around them, the royal guard began to emerge from defensive positions. Diana approached cautiously, her eyes wide with something between awe and fear. "Your Majesty," she said carefully, "the council members who escaped earlier, should we—" "Hunt them down," Lorean commanded, her voice weak but absolute. "Every single one who conspired against us. I want them in chains by morning. And the kingdom, word of this will spread. There will be questions, demands for explanation." Lorean looked at Willard. "Then we tell them the truth. All of it. The purge, the conspiracy, the attempts on our lives. We expose everything these bastards tried to hide for 50 years. They'll call you compromised," Diana warned. "They'll say the Shadow Walker has enchanted you." "Let them try." Lorean's smile was cold. "I'm done playing by their rules, done pretending to be what they want. I'm the queen, he's a king, and together," she took Willard's hand, "together we're going to burn down every corrupt system they built." Diana bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty, I'll begin preparations for—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes went wide, fixed on something behind them. Lorean and Willard turned. Standing in the shattered palace entrance, backlit by firelight, was a figure in white robes, not shadow-touched, not corrupted, pure, radiant, and radiating power that made even Willard's shadows recoil. An old woman stepped forward, leaning on a staff carved from pale wood. Her eyes were milky white, blind but somehow seeing everything. "The Oracle," Diana breathed, dropping to her knees. "The Oracle of the North. She hasn't been seen in 50 years." The Oracle's blind gaze swept over the destruction, the bodies, the victorious but exhausted pair standing in the center of it all. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "The Shadow King has risen. The broken queen stands whole. The bond is complete, and the old powers stir." She pointed her staff at Willard and Lorean. "But this victory is hollow, children. You've won a battle, not the war." "What are you talking about?" Diana demanded. "We destroyed the conspiracy, killed the enemies. The threat is—" "The threat has only just begun." The Oracle's expression was grave. "Marcus Stonefang and the Shadow Walker traitor were not the architects of the purge. They were pawns, tools. The true power behind the massacre of House Ashford still lives, still schemes, still hungers." "Who?" Willard's voice was dangerous. "Who ordered my family's death?" The Oracle was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her words made the blood freeze in Lorean's veins. "The one who stands to gain the most from chaos, the one who has manipulated both shadow and light for centuries, the one who wears a crown but serves only darkness." She turned her blind eyes directly on Lorean. "Your mother, child, Queen Alara Silvercrest, the Winter Queen who should have died 30 years ago. She lives. She orchestrated everything, the purge, the conspiracies, your mate's death, all of it. And now that you've bonded with the Shadow King, now that you've become the one thing she cannot control," the Oracle's voice dropped to a horrified whisper, "she's coming home to kill you both." The world tilted. Lorean's mother had been dead for 30 years, died in childbirth bringing Lorean into the world. There was a tomb, a memorial, a national day of mourning. "That's impossible," Lorean said, but her voice shook. "My mother is dead. I saw her grave." "You saw a lie." The Oracle's staff struck the ground, and the earth trembled. "She faked her death to escape the scrutiny of her crimes. She's been in the Shadowlands this whole time, building an army, perfecting dark magic, waiting for the right moment to reclaim her throne." "And that moment is?" Willard asked, though he already knew the answer. The Oracle pointed to the eastern horizon. Dawn was breaking, but the sun rising wasn't gold, it was black. "Now," the Oracle said,
She's coming now, with an army that makes tonight's attack look like a children's game, and she won't stop until everything you've built, everything you love, is ash. Thunder rolled across the sky, but there were no clouds, just that impossible black sun rising, consuming the light, and in the distance, carried on wind that tasted of winter and death, came the sound of marching, thousands upon thousands of footsteps, an army that blotted out hope. Lorean felt Willard's hand tighten on hers. Through the bond, she felt his exhaustion, his wounds, his power depleted from the battle. They had nothing left to fight with, and the true enemy had just revealed herself. "How long do we have?" Lorean asked, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. The oracle's expression was pitying. "Until the black sun reaches its zenith. 3 hours, maybe 4. She turned to leave, then paused. "There is one chance, one weapon that could stop her, but it requires a sacrifice neither of you may be willing to make." "What sacrifice?" Willard demanded. The oracle looked at their joined hands, at the bond that shimmered between them, bright and strong and newly forged. "One of you must die," she said simply, "willingly, completely, to unlock the full potential of your combined bloodlines. Shadow and light cannot coexist at full power. One must consume the other. Only then will you have the strength to face the Winter Queen." She walked away, her staff tapping against broken stone. "Choose quickly," her voice echoed back. "The black sun waits for no one." Lorean and Willard stood in the ruins of their victory, staring at the impossible darkness rising in the east. "We just found each other," Willard whispered. "After everything, after all the pain, we just—" "I know," Lorean's voice broke. "I know." Through the bond, they felt it, the cruel truth. To save their kingdom, their people, their world, one of them would have to die. And they had 3 hours to decide who.
3 hours. They had 3 hours to decide which one of them would die. Lorean stood in the war room with Diana, maps spread across the table showing enemy positions, troop movements, evacuation routes, all meaningless, all irrelevant, because the oracle's words echoed in her skull like a death sentence. "One of you must die." "There has to be another way," Diana said, her voice tight. "Some magic, some weapons, some—" "There isn't." Lorean's hands were flat on the table, holding her upright. "I've read the texts. Shadow and light are opposing forces. To merge them at full power, one must be sacrificed to fuel the other. It's alchemical law, spiritual physics, unchangeable. Then we fight with what we have. We evacuate the civilians, fortify the inner—" "We'd last 10 minutes." Lorean's voice was hollow. "My mother didn't spend 30 years in hiding to come back with an army we could fight conventionally. She's bringing something that will tear through our defenses like they're made of paper." Diana slammed her fist on the table. "Then what? You just decide which of you dies? Draw straws? Flip a coin?" "He'll volunteer." Lorean's voice cracked. "The moment I tell him the choice, Willard will offer himself, because that's who he is. A man who thinks his life is worth less than others. A man who's been trying to die for 7 years to atone for crimes he didn't commit." "And you'll let him?" "No!" The word tore out of her. "But I can't, I won't." She broke off, pressing her palms to her eyes. "How do I choose between saving him and saving our kingdom? How do I make that calculation?" "Maybe," Diana said quietly, "you don't have to." "What?" "The oracle said one must die willingly. She didn't say it had to be permanent." Diana pulled out an ancient text, one of the forbidden volumes from the archives. Shadow Walker lore speaks of a ritual, a temporary death. The shadow self consumes the physical form, transforming into pure power for a brief window, long enough to fight, to win. And then? Diana's expression was grim. "Then the mate bond pulls them back.
if the bond is strong enough, if the surviving partner has the strength to anchor them, if they can navigate the space between life and death and find their way home. That's a lot of ifs. It's better than permanent death. Or it's just a slower way to lose him. Lorean's hands shook. Diana, what if I can't pull him back? What if the bond isn't strong enough? What if... The door burst open. Willard stood there, still wearing his shadow armor, his eyes wild. I'll do it. Lorean's heart stopped. You were listening? Of course I was listening. Through the bond. I feel everything you feel, remember? He crossed to her in 3 strides. And I'm telling you right now, it has to be me, not you. Me. Willard. I'm the weapon, Lorean. You said it yourself. My power is what we need. Shadow-consuming light. That's the transformation. That's what will give us the strength to fight her. And if you don't come back, then you'll rule without me. You'll be queen. You'll survive. That's what you do. His hands cupped her face. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I don't make it back, if the bond fails, don't grieve. Don't become the widow of winter again. Live, Lorean. Find joy. Be the queen you were always meant to be, not the one fear made you. Tears streamed down her face. You're asking me to let you go. I'm asking you to trust me. He pressed his forehead to hers. I've spent 7 years being afraid of my power, afraid of what I could become. But with you, through the bond, I'm not afraid anymore. So let me do this. Let me be what my family died to protect. Let me be the Shadow King. Lorean wanted to argue, to fight, to find any other solution. But through the bond, she felt his certainty, his peace, his absolute conviction that this was right. I hate this. I hate every part of this. I know, but we don't have time to hate it. We have... He glanced at the black sun through the window. 2.5 hours. We need to prepare. Diana stepped forward. The ritual requires a circle of power, witnesses to anchor the magic, and, she hesitated, a sacrifice of blood from the bonded mate. Your blood, Your Majesty, will be the tether that pulls him back. How much blood? Enough to nearly kill you. Diana's expression was apologetic. The ritual is balanced, life for life. Power for power. You give him your vitality to fuel the transformation. He gives you his shadow to anchor his return. If either of you falters, we both die, Willard finished. I understand. I don't accept that, Lorean said fiercely. We're both coming out of this alive, both of us, together. Willard smiled, sad and beautiful and full of love she'd never thought she'd feel again. Then we'd better not fail. They prepared the ritual in the throne room. The symbolism felt appropriate, the place where they'd first met, where this impossible bond had first sparked to life. Diana drew the circle in silver and shadow iron dust. 12 guards stood at the perimeter, witnesses, anchors, believers in what they were about to attempt. The oracle waited in the corner, her blind eyes seeing everything, saying nothing. Lorean and Willard stood at the center, hands joined. The black sun was nearly its zenith. They could feel the enemy approaching, a wall of cold that made the temperature drop 20 degrees even inside the palace. Last chance to run? Willard said, trying for levity and failing. To where? This is our home, our kingdom, our people. Lorean's grip tightened. We protect what's ours. Together? Always. Diana began the incantation, ancient words in a language that predated kingdoms, that spoke directly to the primal forces of magic, shadow and light, life and death, bond and sacrifice. The circle flared to life. Silver light met shadow darkness, creating a barrier between the physical world and something deeper, something more real. Your blood, Your Majesty, Diana said, holding out a ceremonial knife. Lorean took it without hesitation. She drew the blade across her palm, deep, uncompromising. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin. She pressed her bleeding hand to Willard's chest, directly over his heart. Take it, she commanded. Take my strength, my life, my everything, and use it to come back to me. Willard's eyes began to glow, silver gold at first, then shifting, darkening to pure shadow black. His body started to change, becoming translucent, almost ghostly. "Lorean," he gasped, "the power, I can feel it. It's so much. I don't know if I can." "You can. I believe in you. I choose you, now and forever." She poured more blood on his chest, felt her knees weaken as her life force drained. "Don't you dare let go of me, Willard Ashford. Don't you dare let go." His form was barely solid now, more shadow than man. His consciousness was slipping away from the physical, diving into that space between life and death where true power dwelled. "I love you," he whispered. The words were barely audible, already distant.
He dissolved completely. One moment he was there, solid and warm and real. The next he was pure shadow, formless, ancient, terrifyingly powerful. The shadow expanded, filling the circle, pressing against the barriers. Diana's incantation grew louder, more desperate, holding the magic in place. And Lorean collapsed. She hit the marble floor hard, blood pooling around her from the still bleeding wound. She'd given too much, way too much. Her vision dimmed, her heartbeat slowed. "Your Majesty!" Diana was beside her, pressing cloth to the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with us. You have to stay conscious or he can't find his way back," Lorean finished weakly. "I know, I'm not going anywhere." But she was. She could feel death approaching, patient and inevitable. She'd given Willard everything, her strength, her vitality, her very life force. She just had to hold on long enough for him to use it, long enough for him to win. Then she could let go. Through the bond, faint now, stretched thin as spider silk, she felt Willard in that in-between space, felt him gathering power, felt his consciousness expanding to something vast and terrible and magnificent. The shadow in the circle began to coalesce, to take shape, not human, something beyond human, the true form of a shadow walker at full power. And outside, the black sun reached its zenith. The palace walls exploded inward, not crumbled, not broken, exploded, as if struck by the fist of an angry god. Through the breach came winter itself, ice that formed in mid-air, snow that cut like razors, and at the heart of the storm, riding a throne of frozen darkness, was Queen Ilara Silvercrest, Lorean's mother. She looked exactly as she did in the portraits Lorean had grown up studying, impossibly beautiful, ageless, with platinum hair and eyes like chips of blue ice, but wrong, corrupted. Her skin had a gray pallor, shadows writhed beneath the surface like parasites. "Hello, daughter," Ilara said, her voice echoing with unnatural resonance. "Did you miss me?" She looked at the ritual circle, at the shadow coalescing at its center, at Lorean bleeding out on the marble floor. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Oh, how perfect! You're trying the sacrifice ritual. How noble! How stupid!" She raised a hand wreathed in black ice. "Let me save you the trouble." She sent a spear of frozen darkness straight at Lorean's heart. The shadow in the circle roared. It wasn't a sound, it was a force, a declaration, an absolute rejection of death. The shadow exploded outward, shattering Diana's carefully drawn barrier, and reformed between Ilara and Lorean. When the shadows cleared, Willard stood there. But not as he'd been, not even as the shadow walker form Lorean had seen before. This was something new, something unprecedented. He was 15 feet tall, his body a perfect fusion of man and shadow and something divine. His armor was living darkness that pulsed with constellation-like lights. His eyes burned with silver fire bright enough to hurt,
and on his head sat a crown, not shadow-forged, but real, made of some metal that seemed to exist between worlds. The crown of the Shadow Kings, the one thought lost in the Purge. It had found its rightful heir. "Mother-in-law," Willard said, his voice layered with the power of dead generations. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Prince Willard Ashford, last of the Shadow Walker bloodline, and you murdered my family." Ilara's smile faltered, just for a moment, just enough to show fear. "Impossible. You're incomplete, untrained. You can't possibly—" "I learned fast." Willard's hand extended toward Lorean. Through the bond, now stronger than ever, amplified by the transformation, he poured power back into her. Not his life force, hers. The vitality she'd given him returned tenfold. Lorean gasped as strength flooded back into her body, her heartbeat steady and strong. She stood, and as she did, something incredible happened. Light erupted from her skin, not shadow dark like Willard's power, pure, radiant, silver-white light that matched his darkness perfectly. The sacrifice hadn't consumed light to create shadow, it had balanced them. Shadow and light, darkness and radiance, king and queen, two halves of an impossible whole. Ilara took a step backward, and in her eyes was something Lorean had never thought she'd see. Terror. "You completed the true bond, the one that was only legend, the one my ancestors tried and failed to achieve. You actually—" "We did," Lorean said, taking Willard's massive shadow-wrapped hand in hers. She looked at her mother, the woman who'd faked her death, orchestrated genocides, and conspired to destroy everything Lorean loved, and smiled. "Ready?" she asked Willard through the bond. His answering smile was feral. "Let's end this." They moved as one, shadow and light intertwined, a force of nature giving purpose and rage, and the final battle for the Northern Territories began. Outside, Ilara's army charged through the broken walls, thousands of corrupted creatures, dark mages, ice golems the size of houses. But inside the throne room, two bonded rulers stood ready. And for the first time in 30 years, the Winter Queen realized she might have made a mistake, a fatal one.
The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of shadow and light tearing through Ilara's army like divine judgment. 3 days of Willard and Lorean fighting as a single entity, his darkness consuming corrupted magic, her light healing the land their enemies poisoned. 3 days of the Northern Territories holding its breath, watching their rulers transform from isolated survivors into something legendary. On the 3rd day, at dawn, Ilara Silvercrest fell. Not to sword or shadow, but to exhaustion, to the slow realization that her daughter had become everything she'd tried to prevent, powerful, bonded, unstoppable. In the end, she didn't die fighting. She surrendered, broken and weeping, begging for mercy she'd never shown others. Lorean gave her a trial, public, fair, witnessed by thousands. Then she gave her exile, not death, something crueler, life stripped of power, forced to live among the people she'd spent decades trying to control, a fitting punishment for a woman who'd valued dominance above all else. The kingdom exhaled, and slowly, painfully, beautifully began to heal. 6 months later, the rose garden behind the palace bloomed with impossible abundance. Lorean stood at the center of it, surrounded by flowers that shouldn't exist in winter, night-blooming roses in silver and shadow black, their petals touched with frost that never melted. Magic lingered here now, the kind that came from two powerful bloodlines merging, transforming the very earth.
She wore a gown of silver silk that caught the pre-dawn light, simple and elegant. No crown. Not yet. That would come later, in the private ceremony she and Willard had planned, a deliberate rejection of the grand spectacle the court expected. This wasn't about politics. This was about them. "You look beautiful," Diana said, adjusting the veil of sheer white fabric. "Nervous?" "Terrified," Lorean admitted. "What if I'm not good at this? Being happy, being soft. I spent so long being the Winter Queen, I don't know how to be anything else." "Then learn. You're good at that," Diana smiled. "Besides, you're not doing it alone. That's the whole point, isn't it?" Footsteps on the garden path. Lorean turned. Willard stood at the entrance, and her breath caught. He wore formal black, not a suit, but something older. Traditional Shadow Walker ceremonial robes that Diana had found in the archives and painstakingly restored. The fabric seemed to absorb light, making him look like a living shadow given form. The marks on his skin, the ones that had appeared during his transformation, glowed faintly through the silk, silver-gold constellations mapping his arms and chest. On his head sat the crown of Shadow Kings. He'd argued against wearing it, said it was too much. Lorean insisted. He was a king. Let the world see it. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. No longer haunted, no longer filled with guilt, just warm and present and looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. "Hi," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Hi," she whispered back. Around them, witnesses gathered. Not hundreds, 12. Diana, the guards who'd stood at their side during the ritual, and representatives from Black Hollow, the rebuilt village, now thriving, its people no longer marked by tragedy, but by resilience. The Oracle stepped forward to officiate. She'd stayed after the daddle, claiming she had unfinished business in the Northern Territories. She suspected she just wanted to see how their story ended. "We gather," the Oracle said, her blind eyes somehow seeing everything, "to witness a bonding already complete, to celebrate what is, not what will be. These two have chosen each other through blood and shadow, through sacrifice and salvation. The bond is sealed, the magic is done. This ceremony is merely acknowledgement of what already exists." She turned to Willard. "Do you have words for your queen?" Willard took Lorean's hands. His were shaking. He said, "I wrote vows, spent weeks on them, but standing here, looking at you, they all feel inadequate." He took a breath. "You saw me when I was invisible. You gave me purpose when I wanted to disappear. You made me believe I deserved to take up space in the world. And when I was dying, literally becoming shadow and nothing, you pulled me back. Not because you needed me, but because you wanted me." His voice cracked. "So I vow to you, I will never hide from you. I will never diminish myself to make you comfortable. I will stand beside you, not behind you. I will be your partner, your equal, your home. And I will love you, not despite your darkness, but because of it, because you taught me that darkness isn't evil, it's just part of being whole." Lorean's tears fell freely now. She didn't try to stop them. "Your turn," the Oracle said gently. Lorean steadied her voice. "I spent 7 years convinced that needing someone made me weak, that isolation was strength, that love was a vulnerability I couldn't afford." She squeezed his hands. "You proved me wrong. You showed me that true strength is letting yourself be vulnerable, that real power comes from connection, not control." She smiled through her tears. "I vow to you, I will never ask you to be less than you are. I will never use your love as a weapon or a cage. I will rule with you, not over you, and I will love you, not because you saved me, but because you let me save you too, because you taught me that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we need help." She paused. then added fiercely, "And I vow that anyone who tries to hurt you will learn why they called me the Widow of Winter, because I protect what's mine." Willard laughed, genuine and bright. "That's very romantic." "I'm still learning." The oracle smiled. "Then let these vows stand as witness. Let the bond be acknowledged. Let the—" A bell began to toll. Not the attacked bell, something different, deeper. The coronation bell, the one that only rang when new rulers were crowned. Lorean and Willard looked at each other in confusion. They hadn't scheduled a coronation. This was supposed to be private. Diana stepped forward holding 2 crowns. Not the heavy, ostentatious things the monarchy traditionally used. These were simpler, more meaningful. Lorean's was platinum, woven with moonstone and winter roses, light and ice and strength. Willard's was shadow iron, etched with constellation patterns that matched his marks, darkness and stars and ancient power. "The kingdom voted," Diana said quietly. "After the battle, after everything you did, the council, the new council, the one you established with representatives from every territory, they voted unanimously. They want you both, equal rulers, Shadow King and Light Queen." She placed the crowns in their hands. "So here's your choice. You can have a private bonding and walk away from politics, live quietly, or—" "We take the crowns," Lorean said immediately. She looked at Willard. "Together?" "Together," he agreed. "Always." They crowned each other, not some priest or official, themselves, placing the symbols of power on each other's heads, claiming their right to rule not through inheritance or force, but through choice. The witnesses cheered. It was small and intimate and perfect. As the sun crested the horizon, Lorean and Willard stood hand in hand, their shadows stretching long across the garden, and as the light touched them, something incredible happened. Their shadows merged, became one. Light and dark intertwined so completely, you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Not conquering, not consuming, just together. "We should probably address the kingdom," Willard said, eyeing the palace where Lorean knew thousands were gathering. "They'll want to see the new king and queen." "In a minute." Lorean pulled him toward the palace balcony, the private one, overlooking the gardens and the city beyond. "First, I want to see what we've built."
They stood together, looking out over the northern territories. The damage from the battle was still visible: broken walls, scorched earth, buildings in various states of repair. But there was life, too. People working, children playing, smoke rising from chimneys, voices calling out in markets. A kingdom healing, growing, living. "Do you ever regret it?" Willard asked quietly. "Choosing this? Choosing me? It would have been simpler to stay alone, to rule the way you always had." Lorean turned to look at him, this man who'd been a ghost when she found him, who'd taught her that strength and vulnerability weren't opposites, but partners. "Simple isn't always strong," she said. "You taught me that." She took his hand, their fingers intertwining like their shadows. "Besides, I was never really alone. I was just afraid to admit I was lonely, afraid to admit I needed someone, afraid that needing made me weak. And now? Now I know better." She leaned into him, feeling the bond pulse warm and steady between them. "We saved each other, you know, not because one of us was strong and the other was weak, but because we were both willing to be saved." Willard kissed her forehead. "That's very wise, Your Majesty. I have a very wise partner." They stood there as the sun rose higher, painting the world in gold and shadow. Below, the kingdom stirred. Above, birds began to sing, and between them, the bond hummed with contentment. "Ready?" Lorean asked, "to face them all, to be what they need?" "With you?" Willard smiled, no longer broken, no longer haunted, just present, happy, home. "I can face anything." They walked to the public balcony hand in hand. When they appeared, the crowd erupted in cheers, thousands of voices raised in celebration and hope.
Lorean raised her hand for silence. When she spoke, her voice carried with natural authority, amplified by the magic that now lived in the very stones of the palace. People of the Northern Territories, for 7 years I ruled alone, through fear, through isolation. I told myself it was strength. I was wrong. She gestured to Willard. This man, your Shadow King, taught me that true strength is vulnerability, that real power comes from connection, not control, that we are stronger together than we ever could be apart. Willard stepped forward. And this woman, your Light Queen, taught me that survival isn't the same as living, that guilt is a cage we build for ourselves, that we all deserve second chances, even when we think we don't. They spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing. We vow to rule not through fear, but through justice, not through isolation, but through connection. We will make mistakes, we will stumble, but we will face it all together, and we will never, ever walk alone again. The crowd roared approval, and as they stood there, bathed in morning light, their merged shadow stretched across the courtyard, across the city, across the kingdom itself. A shadow that wasn't threat, but protection. A shadow that said, "We are here, we are together, and we will keep you safe." That night, in their private chambers, Lorean and Willard lay tangled together, exhausted and happy and home. "Think it'll work?" Willard asked, tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Everything we're trying to build, the new government, the distributed power, the—" "I don't know," Lorean admitted, "but we'll figure it out. That's what we do. Together." Together. Through the window, she could see the city lights twinkling, could hear the sounds of celebrations still echoing from the streets. The Northern Territories had survived the winter. Now came the work of spring, of growth and healing and building something better. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, days when the weight of the crown felt too heavy, but they wouldn't face it alone. Lorean pressed closer to Willard, feeling his steady heartbeat, the warmth of his skin, the absolute certainty of the bond between them. She'd spent 7 years as the widow of winter, cold, untouchable, alone. She had no interest in being that woman ever again. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he whispered back. "My queen, my mate, my home." They fell asleep, wrapped in each other, their shadows on the wall merging into one, their breathing synchronized, their bond a living thing that promised, whatever comes, we face it together. The story of the Widow of Winter and the Shadow Prince had ended. The story of the Light Queen and the Shadow King had just begun, and it would be magnificent.